In order to do any real work on this tuner, I've got to loosen things up. Everything is jammed up. This entire mechanism right here will not turn at all. And I want these nuts to turn that are on these screws that go all the way through to the bottom. The screw head's on the bottom, down there by my thumb. There's 3 of them. 1, 2, 3, all the way across. And you adjust the nuts on the opposite end. I've never seen anything like that before. It's kind of interesting. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take some liquid wrench, penetrating oil. I'm going to squirt these babies down. I'm going to let them sit overnight, just soak while I sleep. Won't hurt them a bit. Won't hurt them a bit because this thing will wind up ultimately going into the. It'll go into the ultrasonic cleaner. It's going to be hit with hot water in the sink and everything. Any oil that's in there will be, be washed out before it's over. You won't even know it's there. So I'm going to spray the whole thing. I'm going to get it all. I'm going to give it a good bath. This is the way it'll sit overnight, but I'm going to cover it right now all over with that stuff. It won't hurt it a bit. It has soaked all night long in the liquid wrench. Now we'll go ahead and hit it with a good shot of hot water here. Really hot water. See if we can't get that thing to loosen up a little bit all over. The hot water has softened up that old, look at that old rubber wheel that was down in there. Look at that, took it right off. Fantastic. I didn't have to pick or nothing. Look at that. But it's still frozen. So we're going to have to run it through the ultrasonic cleaner a couple times to see if that doesn't help. The rest of it, not too bad. It's still a little stiff, but it does work a little easier. We'll run them both through the cleaner and see what happens. Yeah, the ultrasonic cleaner is doing its job. This is the first run. I got the heat on, as you can see with the red light. That's controlled by the TC button, temperature control button, turns it on and off. And each cycle is 480 seconds long. I can set the time with this set button. But I kind of like this little ultrasonic cleaner. It's not the best one in the world, but I got it from Harbor Freight. My wife bought it for me. It was only like 59 bucks or something, real cheap, and it's come in handy for a lot of things. Now I did add a little bit of this all-purpose cleaner with bleach, Walmart brand. Works pretty good though. That always helps with the cleaning process. Add some kind of cleaner to it. It's time to change the water. So far it's done a really good job, but I think I'll get rid of the water, put some new cleaner in, and run it through about 4 or 5 more cycles. Everything I get off the tuner now is that much less I have to take off later by hand. Alright, round 2. Let's go ahead and pour a little bit more cleaner in there. And turn her back on. Set her back up for 480. The heat goes on. And there we go. Alright, at the end of round 4, I've cleaned it about 4 or 5 more times in round 4, and as you can see, it's still coming up dirty. But, at least the shaft is turning now on this thing right here. We're making some progress. Well, that's about as clean as she's going to come, both the tuner and the tuning wheel adjuster. So it's time to start taking some things apart. I need to get this thing apart. There's a shaft inside of a shaft, and it's just still not budging. So I'll have to take the screws out of this collar. There's 2 screws that hold this brass collar in, and then this entire mechanism should come out, and I might be able to separate this center rod from the outside. Alright, they're loose. The collar's loose anyway. Let's see if I can pull this apart now. With one. Ooh, it's coming right out. Look at there. Ooh, lucky me. Oh my goodness. There we go. There we go. That's all there was to it. Just a little old collar. Boy, that thing was grungy still down inside. It's still going to take a little bit of cleaning. Let's see if I can separate these 2 pieces now, if they're supposed to be separated. I finally got it broke loose. I was able to take a vice grip and hold one, and another small vice grip and hold the outside shaft, and then just kind of gently work it back and forth. And now she's turning. The outside, the center fine adjust is turning. But I still need to do a lot of cleaning on it and some oiling and stuff. I'll just maybe shoot a little bit of WD-40 down there right now, and it'll help just a little bit. Work it in a little bit, and then I'm going to have to run it through the ultrasonic cleaner again. Oh yeah, she's turning very nicely now, very nicely. Some of your Philco radios, the 620 and the 630B and a couple others probably have the same sort of coarse and fine just tuning mechanism. In order to release this collar around here, which has ball bearings in it, I assume, that fit down into a slot, this fine adjust has to be shoved down in, which releases the ball bearings so this collar can come off. And once the collar comes off, then I can remove the two pieces, you know, the fine adjust from the, you know, inside of the larger barrel, and then clean them up real good and then put them back in reverse order. Here's something I discovered by accident. I put the tube shields from this radio in here and gave it 3 or 4 cycles to get it nice and clean, and then I was going to take it out and strip them and repaint them because they were in such bad shape. But guess what? Just putting them in there like that, look at here, this stuff just comes right off with no problem at all. Look at that. A couple of shots through the look at that. It's just rubbing off all by itself. I don't have to strip these things or nothing. Let me show you here. Look at that. Stuff just rolls right off, and I did it one-handed. You might want to keep that in mind, folks. Alright, I managed to get this thing completely apart. I had to do it by bending those little tabs you see all around that ring. I bent them away just a little bit, just enough to slip these babies here out from underneath those little things. And I was able to get them out. One sits on top of another just like that. The bearings sit down in the center here. Let me get my pencil. These 3 bearings, 1, 2, and the third one, sit down in this area here and in these holes. And they rotate. The balls are in a race, a bearing race. If I can get this stupid thing out of here. There's the bearing race right there. The ball bearings sit like that. And when you turn it, they run around this bearing race here. But they do sit in these holes. The problem I have right now, one of the reasons this shaft was very gritty feeling when I turned it, it just wasn't smooth, the outer shaft. Not the inner shaft, but the outer shaft. One of these bearings has some chrome missing off it. Broke off over the years. Kind of messed up now, So I shined it the best I could, cleaned it the best I could, and it's just going to have to be a little bit gritty when you turn the larger shaft. I mean, you'll be able to feel it maybe. I don't know. Once you put the wooden knob on there, once I get that on there, we may not feel it at all. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and grease this whole thing up and put it all back together. And since this video has gotten a lot longer than I expected, we're not going to do the tuner this time. We're going to move on to something else and wrap up the video with something other than the tuner. This is that small bracket that holds the shaft that we're working on. And I decided it's all been derusted and everything, but I think I better go ahead and put a coat of clear on it. And, I've got a bunch of half-empty cans of clear enamel, clear this, clear that in my shed. So this time I'm just going to take this and I'm going to try to use it up instead of having all these half cans laying around. This is a clear acrylic. So we'll go ahead and spray it with that and protect it from any future rust. Let's see if we can't get this thing back together and, to at least somewhat resemble what it did originally. The first thing we're going to do is take these 3 ball bearings and we're going to put them in these 3 holes in this shaft. Well, actually, the first thing I did was slide the small fine adjust shaft into the larger barrel, okay? And we know we got a good fit because she drops right down in here. Did you see how slick that? Look at that. Just as slick as can be now. And we get the race lined up with the hole, the race at the bottom of this thin shaft lined up with the hole. Now comes the grease in each of these holes. I'm going to stick a little ball bearing down there after I've greased it. Put a little grease over the top. You want those ball bearings to be nice and gooey with grease. We'll do that with all 3 of these holes. Stick it on down in there. Put the old ball bearing in there. It's a lot easier to do with 2 hands than 1. The bearings are in and greased, and the first step, of course, is to put the copper plate. Put a little grease around the center of the copper plate, and then put the copper plate in this little ring that has the tabs holding it. It goes in from this side where the fine adjust is, this way. This tab right here has to fit in this square hole right there. And this whole mechanism will come up and go down that way. This shaft, this non-movable shaft, goes through here, like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the second half on, and we'll slide that up this way. What I'm doing is sandwiching those ball bearings between those 2 copper discs, and then I'll squeeze them together nice and tight, and then take these duckbill pliers with no teeth in them. Duckbill pliers are smooth on the inside. Then I'll re-crimp down those tabs all the way around. Well, there she is, all back together. Looks real good. Now I need to stick it down through this hole here and get it hooked up with this brass collar. Now, because I sprayed this with some clear, that acrylic, you remember? It's got clear. I'm going to have to take my pocket knife and kind of ream out just a little bit, get that layer of paint off there and off the hole in the back. So this shaft will fit nice and easy down there. I don't want to have to force it. We want the shaft to be able to turn. And there she slips right down in there, just like snot. Can't beat that, huh? It's still a little rough, because of that ball bearing that's missing part of its face, but it catches every once in a while. You can feel that ball bearing catching, but not like it did. And the fine adjust is really nice. It works really well. Okay, now all we have to do is put this collar in there. And it needs the old rubber. I had to get rid of the old rubber wheel. So we're going to need one. Well, it just so happens that in this envelope, I have one. Check that out, huh? Made out of neoprene, especially for this radio, by Adams Manufacturing Company. Adams Manufacturing Company, they're on the internet. Well, sometimes you run into trials and tribulations, and this is one of them. I'm having a heck of a time getting this knurled end of this collar into the hole on that neoprene ring. Holy mackerel. Yeah, I've tried just about everything. I put a little grease even on the end of it here, around this ring, trying to get her through. I'll get it. Just going to take a while. Man, they should have sent instructions with this. Well, try as I may, I was unable to get that rubber wheel over that hub and onto that knurled area. So, plan B. I took a styrofoam cup, filled it, just a little bit less than half full with water, about that size of a cup. And then I put the wheel down in the bottom and microwaved it for 40 seconds. I'm going to let it sit there in that hot water. Maybe it'll soften up enough to where it'll slip over the rim of this knurled area. Well, that didn't work either. So I microwaved it another 20 seconds. Success at last. It softened it up just enough where I was able to force it down over it. You got to push and force pretty hard, but it finally went over there. A lot easier than it was doing in the beginning. So let's go ahead and get these 2 set screws put in it, and then get it back on here. And once we're done, we'll call it a wrap. Well, there it is, all back together. If you ever work on one of these and you put the new rubber wheel on, when you put it through the back plate, don't jam it through too far. Try to kind of keep it at a flush, because if you jam the rubber wheel too forward against the plate, it not only jams the wheel forward, but it jams the shaft forward, and it'll be very hard to turn. For the last 20 minutes or so, I've been gluing these antenna coils together, and they're pretty solid now. This one here was real loose on the top, if you recall, earlier in the series. nice and tight. I glued it on the inside all the way around, and then I put a small bead of it around the outside as well, so it's nice and strong. You know, super glue gel works real good. Then I took the old acid brush, and dipped it in the alcohol and gave this thing a real light scrubbing, both of them. Both of them got a light scrubbing all the way around, and all the dirt is off. So it's just a matter of taking the brush and brushing it with the alcohol down in between each of the connections and everything. So now we're at the point where all I have to do is solder on new wires. Piece of cake, huh? And then ohm everything out, and it should be okay. Now you got to be real careful with these antenna coils, or any kind of coil. Any kind of coil that you mess with out of these old radios, be very, very careful. Now they can be re-wound and things like that, but it's just a big pain in the butt. And down inside, you have to understand that wires run on the outside of these coils, but they also run down in the center from top to bottom. So you got to be careful, when you stick your old brush down in there to kind of clean out the cobwebs and whatever else. You got to be careful. Be very careful. There was a lot of dust, lint, and dirt, and all kinds of stuff inside these. In the last video, you saw that we used nail polish on the transformer, and you can do the same thing on these coils. A lot of people use that Q-dope stuff, but I'll tell you what, I do not like Q-dope. It turns milky white after it dries. I don't like that. I don't want white looking coils. And you only have to put the nail polish. Nail polish has worked very well in the past, by the way, for me. And you don't need to cover the entire thing. You just need to cover the wires. Now, if you want to cover the whole thing, go ahead. But you only need to cover the wires. So let me go ahead and finish this up, and I'll show you what it looks like. And there's the finished product. Well, I think they look pretty spiffy. They look really good. Here's the other one. A whole lot better than they did when we started. On the bottom of these coils, insulating the coil from the chassis, were paper gaskets. There was one on each of the coils. And actually, they're not in bad shape. They're pretty flexible. But, they are paper. And they will deteriorate in the not too distant future. Be gone forever. I'm really surprised at how flexible these are considering the condition of the chassis. Anyway, there's two holes in them. There's a little tab right here and a little tab right there. And the outer hole fits in the tab. These things go on like that. Just fit right up there. Get that wire out of the way. It's giving me headaches. There we go. Goes on there just like that. And then the center hole right here is where the screw goes. Okay? Well, what we're going to do, we're not going to use these. We're going to go ahead and trace these things. Trace both of them out on this piece of plastic. Trace them out with a pencil and then cut them out with some scissors. And then we're going to punch the holes. And we'll have nice plastic ones. And they'll be a little bit, they won't be quite as round as these because these interfered, the way these things worked, they interfered with the wires over here. So you notice that one side of them are kind of bent down a little bit, see it? Well, we won't be able to do that with the plastic. The plastic is not going to bend down like that, like it is on both of these gaskets. So we'll cut it a little bit smaller and that'll do the job. All new wires on the larger coil have been soldered on. They look real good. I've got them attached with a rubber band around there to kind of keep them in place. And I figured if I soldered them on in this direction, from the top of the coil toward the bottom, I ought to be able to clear the disc that we're going to put on the bottom for insulation. It can be a little larger now. I think that's going to work out pretty good because I can bend the wires, over in this direction where they'll be totally clear of the insulator. I think that's going to work. Alright, let's see if we can get some wires now on this old mangy second one. And that's it. It wraps up the coil. All the wires are on, just waiting to be put back on the chassis. And that also wraps up this video until next time. I wanted to get in the tuner, and it just wasn't enough time. And so next time we'll be concentrating strictly on the tuner, nothing else. So until then, I appreciate you being here one more time. This is John.